This is a deep dive documentary about the entire Roman Empire in only 14 minutes. This is the first time ever I'm releasing something like this. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. A. The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. The title says it all. You are about to travel through centuries of power, betrayal, and glory. Discover how the mighty Roman Empire rose from myth to dominate the world, and how it finally crumbled into history. Let's start with the beginning, shall we? How was the city of Rome founded? According to Roman tradition, Rome was founded in the year 753 BCE by Romulus, who killed his twin brother, Remus, after the two of them were raised by a she-wolf. While historians today generally consider the traditional date for the founding of early Rome to be historically inaccurate, most do agree that the city was founded sometime in the late 8th century BC. In fact, archaeological evidence suggests that Rome had been occupied intermittently throughout the 10th century BC by various Italic peoples. However, legend has it that Rome was initially a small village ruled over by a king. That all changed when the legendary Romulus took the throne. Within a few decades, he transformed the settlement into a city and began expanding its territory. By the time of his death, Rome was a major power in central Italy. After Romulus, Rome would continue to grow under the rule of a series of strong kings, including Numa, Pompilius, Tellus, Hostalius, Ancus, Marcius, Tarquinius, Superbus, who was later expelled. The Romans established a republic in 509 BCE, ending their monarchy. During the next 3 centuries, Rome would conquer the Italian peninsula, defeating the Etruscans, the Greeks, and many other peoples along the way. But it was during the Second Punic War that Rome truly came into its own as a world power. In 218 BCE, Hannibal Barca, the greatest general in Carthaginian history, crossed the Alps with an army of 37,000 men and 10 elephants and invaded Italy. Despite being outnumbered, the Romans held off the Carthaginians and eventually defeated them at the decisive Battle of Zama. In 202 BCE, this victory made Rome the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. But Rome's power would continue to grow in the following centuries as well. By the mid-1st century BC, Rome controlled almost the entire Mediterranean Sea, including North Africa, Spain, France, Greece, and the Middle East. It also ruled directly or indirectly over much of Europe, including Britain and Germany. Under the rule of Augustus, Rome reached its territorial peak and prosperity. But beneath the surface, the empire was in decline. By the 3rd century AD, the Roman Empire was being challenged by a variety of outside forces, including the Goths, the Franks, and the Alemanni. At the same time, corruption and decadence had set in among the Roman elite. The once proud legions had been emasculated and replaced by a corrupt and ineffective Roman police force. And the vast majority of the population was living in poverty. By the 5th century, the empire was on the verge of collapse. When the Germanic tribes sacked Rome in 410 AD, it was clear that the end was nigh. The last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed in 476 AD, and the Western Roman Empire was no more. The Eastern Roman Empire, however, survived for another 1,000 years. Despite its flaws, the Roman Empire was one of the greatest achievements of the ancient world. Its innovative legal system, its advanced infrastructure, and its contributions to art and literature have had a lasting impact on Western civilization. And if you want to learn more about the Roman Empire, make sure to check out my channel. I've got videos on pretty much everything you could possibly want to know about the Roman Empire. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Alright, now that you've learned about the basics of the Roman Empire, it's time to take a deeper dive into some of the most important aspects of this fascinating period of history. First up, let's talk about some of the major emperors of Rome. We'll start with Julius Caesar, who was born in 100 BCE and died in 44 BCE. He was one of the most powerful and influential Roman generals and statesmen. In fact, some historians argue that Caesar was the first dictator of Rome, even though he never held that title officially. Either way, Caesar was a key player in the transformation of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. Caesar was born into an old but relatively minor Roman family. However, he was able to rise to prominence thanks to his military skills and political acumen. He played a key role in the conquest of Gaul and made enemies of the Roman Senate in the process. In 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his army, effectively starting a civil war. He defeated his enemies decisively at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC and returned to Rome as the undisputed master of the city. However, Caesar's rule was short-lived. In 44 BC, he was assassinated by a group of senators led by Gaius, Cassius, Longinus, and Marcus Junius Brutus. Next up, we have Augustus, who was born in 63 BCE and died in 14 CE. He was the first emperor of Rome and the founder of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Augustus is often considered to be the most successful ruler in Roman history. He inherited a broken and chaotic empire from his uncle, Julius Caesar, but he managed to restore order and stability to the state. Augustus's reign was a time of great prosperity for Rome. The Pax Romana, a Roman peace, was a period of relative tranquility that lasted for over 2 centuries. During Augustus's reign, Rome reached the height of its power and wealth. He was also responsible for commissioning the construction of many important buildings and monuments, including the famous Augustus of Prima Porta. Augustus was succeeded by his stepson Tiberius in 14 AD. Another important emperor was Nero, who ruled from 54 to 68 AD. Nero is often remembered as a cruel and tyrannical ruler, but he was actually quite popular during his lifetime. He was responsible for some of Rome's most ambitious building projects, including the construction of the Domus Aurea, or Golden House. Unfortunately, Nero's reputation was tarnished by his infamous persecution of Christians. Next, we should mention Trajan, who was emperor from 98 to 117 AD. Trajan was the first emperor to come from outside of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. He was born in Spain and was of humble origins. However, he was chosen by the aging Emperor Nerva to be his heir, and he went on to have a long and successful reign. Trajan was a great general, and he expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent. He also built roads, aqueducts, and public buildings throughout the empire. Trajan was succeeded by his adopted son Hadrian in 117 AD. Hadrian was a prolific builder, and he constructed some of Rome's most iconic structures, including the Pantheon and the Temple of Venus in Rome. However, he was not a great military commander, and he was forced to spend much of his reign defending the empire's borders. Hadrian was succeeded by Antoninus. Pious in 138 AD, Antoninus continued Hadrian's policy of strengthening the empire's defenses. He also appointed competent governors to rule the provinces, and he maintained a policy of religious tolerance. Antoninus was succeeded by Marcus Aurelius in 161 AD. Marcus Aurelius was a philosopher king, and he wrote the famous Meditations, a personal journal of his thoughts and reflections on life and the universe. Marcus Aurelius also faced a number of challenges during his reign, including a series of plagues and the Antonine Plague. He was also forced to fight several wars against the Germanic tribes. Despite these challenges, Marcus Aurelius is remembered as one of the most virtuous and wise emperors in Roman history. He was succeeded by his son Commodus in 180 AD. Commodus was a weak and ineffectual ruler, and he is often criticized for bringing the empire into decline. He was assassinated in 192 AD, and the empire was plunged into a period of instability and civil war. The Severan dynasty, which began with Septimius Severus in 193 AD, brought the empire back from the brink. Septimius Severus was a capable military commander, and he put down the revolt of the Roman Praetorian Guard, which had nearly led to the end of the empire. He also campaigned in Britain and along the Danube frontier. Septimius Severus was succeeded by his son Caracalla in 211 AD. Caracalla was responsible for the construction of the Baths of Caracalla, one of Rome's largest and most luxurious bathhouses. He also introduced the Caracallan citizenship, which granted Roman citizenship to all free inhabitants of the empire. However, Caracalla was assassinated in 217 AD. His successor, Elagabalus, was only 18 years old when he took the throne, and he was effectively ruled by his grandmother, Julia Maesa. Elagabalus died in 222 AD. The Severan dynasty ended with Julia Maesa's youngest son, Severus Alexander. In 235 AD, his assassination marked the end of the 3rd century crisis, a period of intense instability and upheaval in the Roman Empire. The crisis of the 3rd century saw the empire nearly torn apart by civil wars and barbarian invasions. The economy collapsed and inflation soared. But despite all this, the empire survived. And in the 4th century, it entered a period of recovery and renewal known as the Constantinian Renaissance. The most important event of the 4th century was the conversion of Emperor Constantine I to Christianity in 312 AD. This paved the way for Christianity to become the official religion of the empire in 380 AD in the 5th century. The empire faced its final crisis. In 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked Rome, and in 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire fell. However, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for another 1,000 years. Now let's move on to one of the most interesting aspects of the Roman Empire: its military. The Roman army was the most powerful fighting force in the ancient world. It was highly disciplined and well-trained, and it was equipped with some of the most advanced weapons of the time. The Roman army was divided into 2 parts: the legion and the auxiliary troops. The legion was made up of foot soldiers, and there were several types of foot soldiers in the Roman army, including the infantryman, the javelin man, and the swordman. Auxiliary troops were made up of cavalry and light infantry. The Roman army was also supported by a number of non-combatants, including engineers, medics, and logistics personnel. One of the most important features of the Roman army was its use of discipline and organization. Soldiers were trained to follow orders without question, and they were expected to maintain a high level of discipline at all times. This made the Roman army extremely effective in battle, as it allowed them to maneuver quickly and efficiently. The Roman army was also equipped with some of the most advanced weapons of the ancient world. They used a variety of swords, javelins, shields, and helmets. The Romans also developed the first true siege engines, which allowed them to lay siege to fortified cities and castles. One of the most important aspects of the Roman army was its logistics. The army was supplied with food, water, and other necessities by a network of supply trains. This was essential to the army's success, as it allowed them to stay in the field for long periods of time without having to rely on the enemy. The Roman army was ultimately responsible for the conquest of much of the known world. It was the backbone of the Roman Empire and played a key role in its success. Finally, let's talk about some of the most famous monuments and structures of the Roman Empire. Rome was a city of magnificent buildings and monuments, many of which are still standing today. The Colosseum is perhaps the most iconic structure from the Roman Empire. This massive amphitheater was used for gladiatorial combats, animal hunts, executions, and other public spectacles. The Colosseum was constructed in 80 AD and could hold up to 50,000 spectators. The Pantheon is another remarkable structure from Roman history. This former Roman temple is now a church, but it was originally built as a shrine to all the gods of the Roman Empire. The Pantheon was constructed in 126 AD and is notable for its impressive dome, which is the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. The Arch of Titus is a triumphal arch that was erected in 81 AD to commemorate the Roman conquest of Jerusalem. The arch is decorated with reliefs depicting the siege of Jerusalem and the capture of the temple treasure. The Trajan's Column is a towering obelisk that was built in 113 AD. To commemorate the Roman conquest of Dacia, the column is covered with a spiral relief depicting the campaign against the Dacians. These are just a few of the many amazing monuments and structures that were built during the Roman Empire. These structures are not only impressive feats of engineering and architecture, but they also provide us with a window into the culture and history of the Roman people. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of the Roman Empire. From its humble beginnings as a small Italian city-state to its eventual conquest of the Mediterranean world, the Roman Empire is one of the most fascinating periods in history. I hope you enjoyed learning about this incredible empire. If you did, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel.
Thanks for watching.